Good afternoon. You know what? I don't need a mask to speak at a press conference right here. I can switch. Good afternoon. This evening, the Minnesota House of Representatives is going to pass a bill to legalize cannabis in Minnesota, expunge criminal records, create a new marketplace designed to support Minnesota's small and medium-sized businesses, take a step forward on racial equity, address the harms caused by the war on drugs for communities of color and especially for Black Minnesotans. This bill is a long time in coming. It is the product of hundreds and hundreds of people who have come together in committee hearings, in working groups to develop policy, at town halls across Minnesota. It is the product of years of activism by people like our own Jess Hansen, state representative. And we have this bill before us today because Minnesotans have decided that it is time to legalize cannabis and right the wrongs of the criminal prohibition of cannabis that has failed Minnesota, it has failed Minnesotans, and it's time for it to change. We will be taking up the bill after a brief recess when we convene and expect this bill to pass tonight with bipartisan support. And I would like to introduce Representative Rena Moran, Chair of the Ways and Means Committee.
All right. Good evening, everyone, or afternoon, however we want to take it. But glad that you're here today. Again, my name is Rena Moran. I represent District 65A in St. Paul, and I also chair the Ways and Means Committee. So I know how hard change can be. I know how much easier it is for elected officials to stick to the status quo, especially when it comes to this issue. I'm grateful to Majority Leader Winkler and other legislators for our steadfast leadership in working to legalize marijuana. Recognizing that when it comes to cannabis, we can't keep relying on the status quo. Today, the Minnesota House is taking one of the most significant steps towards racial equity. More than half of U.S. adults, over 128 million people, have tried marijuana, despite it being illegal under federal law. Public support for legalizing marijuana went from 12% in 1969 to over 66% today. Yes, there is a huge belief that by regulating marijuana, it will lower street crimes, take business away from those selling marijuana on the street. And yes, it will make marijuana much use safer towards requiring testing, labeling, and child-proof packaging. Yes, legalizing recreational marijuana will add millions to the economy. Yes, it will create hundreds of jobs. Yes, it will free up scarce police resources. And yes, it will stop huge racial inequities and disparities in marijuana enforcement. Over the past 2 years, we had thoughtful, intentional, careful conversations on this issue. All across the state, listening to Minnesotans of all viewpoints, we've heard about how harmful our current cannabis policies are for Minnesotans, especially for our Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The racial disparities are absolutely impossible to ignore, and the damage caused through unnecessary interactions with the criminal justice system that lasts a lifetime. It's time to dispose of the outdated rhetoric that has empowered the failed criminal prohibition for so long, and instead it's moved us forward to a new approach to cannabis. This legislation is responsive to what Minnesotans are asking for as we craft a vision for legal cannabis in this state. It's time to leave the failed 20th century policies behind and enact the responsible, safe, and equitable bill we set to consider today in the 21st century. Thank you. And I would like to represent Representative Hansen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Representative Jess Hansen. I represent District 56A from Savage in Northwest Burnsville. Today is historic. For decades, relentless advocates and dedicated Minnesotans have done their part to bring an end to cannabis prohibition, and a few years ago, the House DFL joined in that mission. A majority of Minnesotans have called on legislators to establish a safe, legal, and regulated market that is reparative in nature. And they've said loud and clear that they believe prohibition is the problem, not cannabis. Today, the Minnesota House is responding to that call with a comprehensive bill to end cannabis prohibition here in Minnesota that will develop an equitable and just market that Minnesotans deserve. There's no good defense for prohibition, and there is no good reason to keep it anymore. It causes more harm than good, it's ineffective, and it's wrought with disparities, especially for our BIPOC communities. Prohibition has robbed people of their homes, their jobs, their children, their sense of safety, their freedom, and it has left us with countless issues that we can't fully cover here today. But despite that failed history of prohibition, what we can do is stand before you today to do something about it. Full legalization in a regulated market will increase public safety, it will improve public health, and it will begin to right some of the wrongs of our past. Minnesotans are ready to move ahead and lead the Midwest in this booming industry. HF 600 was built by and for Minnesotans with the collaboration of dozens of organizations and departments, community organizers and voters, local government and health officials, and we continue to invite the Minnesota Senate to join us in this collaboration. Today, when this body passes HF 600, we will be one step closer to creating a world where prohibition is no longer the problem. I'm looking forward to today's critical and important debate, and I invite all my fellow Minnesotans to tune in, watch this online, and celebrate virtually this historic moment. Thank you. And I'd like to turn it over to Speaker Hortman.
Thank you. Well, I'm so honored to stand here with all of my colleagues, my partner, the Majority Leader, Representative Moran, the Chair of the Ways and Means Committee, who has new members of the Rena Moran fan club every day, and every time she steps up to speak, and Representative Hansen. We were pretty bummed when Representative Cantrell decided not to seek re-election, but really honored to stand here with my sister, Jessica Hansen. So I want to really thank the Majority Leader, who has exercised tremendous leadership over the past several years and worked with Minnesotans across the state from all walks of life to get us to the moment that we're at here today. These thoughtful efforts will result in probably the most carefully considered cannabis bill in the country. It's responsible, and it's time for us to end prohibition. Equity and criminal justice reform are top concerns for the Minnesota House DFL, and this is an important part of those efforts. People use cannabis at roughly the same rate, regardless of race, but in Minnesota, people of color are 8 times more likely to be arrested for a cannabis offense compared to white Minnesotans. Criminalizing a product that most people think should be available and continuing our legacy of racial injustice is simply not defensible any longer. By creating a regulatory framework in this bill, we will address any of the risks posed by legal adult use cannabis. We can establish a more sensible set of laws relating to cannabis and improve both healthcare and the criminal justice system at the same time. We know that Senate Republicans are opposed, as Senator Gazelka's dad joke revealed earlier today, but we're continuing to move forward on this because Minnesotans need to know that we are fighting for them. They have come forward, they have told us this is the right thing to do, this is the right time to do it, and we join with them in passing House File 600 today.
I think we can take some questions if you have any.
Given the Senate's position on your package, I'm curious if there are aspects of it that could potentially be negotiated. I'm thinking specifically about the provision that would include flower or in the sort of medical cannabis program. Just curious if you could talk a little bit about what aspects of it could be open to negotiation.
Yeah, I think there are a couple. So you highlight flower, the medical program. When we travel, you know what? I keep forgetting I don't have to wear it for this. When we travel across Minnesota, we heard in every place we went to 15 communities, and every place we went, we heard about how expensive our medical program is and how restrictive it is. We don't allow flower in the program like many other states do, and so we see costs that are 3 times or 4 times what they are in other states. And this is, these are treatments for people with severe chronic conditions, for forms of cancer or rare diseases that are hard to address in any other way. So I think that there is a very strong chance that we can get flower in the medical program this year. And I think that we are doing it because we are putting this bill front and center and showing that there is an appetite at the state capitol to move forward on these bills. And it's also, I think, showing Republicans how much support there is among their own Republican base. By bringing this bill forward, I know that they are hearing from their own voters about the need to do this broader legalization effort, and I think that is partly why they're willing to move forward on the medical program. The other side of that, which is, I think, kind of the same consideration, is reducing penalties, reducing sentences, trying to address the criminal justice element. Even the people who oppose the bill that we have today, or oppose the idea of legalization, admit that the criminal justice side of our current cannabis laws are doing harm. And we're seeing some willingness on the part of Republicans to move on that. And I think as we look forward to police reform and accountability legislation, a public safety bill, criminal justice reform, there is a possibility we could get some movement there too. All right, thank you.
Got the over-under on how many hours tonight?
Over 1, under 8.
I thought there'd be questions chock full of puns.
No, I would get them a dirty look. All right, thank you all.